You're watching our 24 News World News program, and up next are tonight's top stories. President Abdelmadjid Tebboune meets French Interior Minister, launching a new security cooperation mechanism. Algeria also deepens military ties with Rome and expands multi-dimensional partnership with Niger. A possible nuclear deal is on the table between Iran and the United States, but Iran threatens American bases if it is attacked. Another step toward peace. New talks in Geneva. Zelensky agrees to a US-backed unconditional ceasefire. Trump says he is optimistic and pushes Kiev to make a swift deal with Moscow. And deadly Zionist violations in Gaza shatter the calm ahead of Ramadan. The UN condemns settlement growth, and violence is spiking in the West Bank. Welcome back. First off in our news tonight, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune received France's Interior Minister Laurent Nunez and his delegation on Tuesday. The meeting brought together senior officials from both sides, including Principal Private Secretary to the President, Boualem Boualem, Interior and Transport Minister Said Sayoud, Diplomatic Affairs Advisor Amar Abba, and the Director General of Internal Security, Major General Abdelkader Aitwarabi. Following his meeting with President Tebboune, France's Interior Minister vowed to step up security cooperation and get relations back on track.
I have just met with the President of the Republic, who honored me with his presence after I worked all day yesterday with my counterpart, Mr. Said Sayoud, as well as with all the heads of the Algerian and French security services to reactivate a very high-level security cooperation mechanism that covers judicial, police and intelligence cooperation in order to reinforce and resume normal security relations. I would like to thank the Algerian Minister of the Interior who made it possible for us to work together.
Nunez says President Tebboune directed his officials to work more closely with France on police and judicial matters. Paris, he added, is ready to move forward on that immediately.
Je remercie le président Tebboune qui m'a reçu et qui a
I thank President Tebboune who received me and who, of course, confirmed and asked the Algerian authorities to collaborate with the French authorities to improve our cooperation once again in police and judicial matters and also in matters of readmission. All of this must now be implemented as quickly as possible. That is what I want to tell you, and I'm obviously pleased with my visit here to Algeria. We will, of course, continue the cooperation, which I hope will continue, as do the Algerian President, the Algerian Minister of the Interior and both government, so that these relations in matters of security and security cooperation and in matters of immigration can continue at a very high level.
Still with Algeria's related news, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and Nigerian President Abdurrahman Tiani reaffirmed their rejection of any foreign interference in Africa. In a joint statement closing the Tiani's two-day visit to Algiers, they described the trip as historic, marking a new era of confident and forward-looking cooperation. Both leaders said the visit reflects their shared determination to overcome challenges and strengthen their countries' exemplary ties while addressing regional issues.
This visit symbolizes the shared will of the two leaders to overcome temporary difficulties in order to preserve the exemplary nature of their relations and to confront regional challenges together. The two presidents also reaffirmed their attachment to the founding principles of their relations, namely respect for each state's sovereignty and territorial integrity, non-interference in internal affairs, effective solidarity in the face of common threats, and their conviction that the future of the Sahel will be built by the countries of the region themselves through local and inclusive solutions.
Both presidents see eye to eye on the big issues. Their message is African crises need African solutions. The Nigerian leader thanked Algeria for standing by his country's sovereignty and rejecting any military intervention. Salman Steve has more.
From Algeria to Niger, decades of historic and human ties shape a shared geopolitical present as both countries work to harness their potential for the benefit of their peoples. The Nigerian president's visit to Algeria was seen as a key opportunity to address regional and continental issues. The two sides agreed to immediately reactivate joint mechanisms to strengthen border coordination and align counter-terrorism efforts.
In the light of continuing terrorist threats and transitional organized crime, the two leaders expressed their deep concern and affirmed that the security of one is inseparable from the security of the other. In this spirit of active solidarity, they agreed to immediately reactivate the Algerian-Nigerian mechanism concerned to strengthen coordination in border surveillance and harmonize counterterrorism strategies and the fight against related scourges.
The convergence of the two presidents' views on major regional and international issues extended to adopting African political solutions to regional crises and expressing solidarity with just causes in accordance with international law and United Nations resolutions.
The two presidents also reaffirmed their attachment to the founding principles of their relations, namely respect for each state's sovereignty and territorial integrity, non-interference in internal affairs, effective solidarity in the face of common threats, and their conviction that the future of the Sahel will be built by the countries of the region themselves through local and inclusive solutions.
Algeria's hosting of its southern neighbor, Niger, was seen by analysts as reshaping the landscape of bilateral relations and paving the way for a new and promising development-oriented future, thereby bringing an end to an unusual period of coolness between the two countries.
كانت زيارة كنا ننتظر فيها منذ مدة تحققت والحمد لله بهذه الزيارة ننهي مرحلة كانت غير طبيعية لبرودة بين البلدين رغم أن الشعبين واصلوا في التواصل مع بعضهم بعض. إذن زيارة رفعت سقف الأخوة والصداقة معا كجيران كإخوة كأصدقاء.
For his part, the President of the Republic of Niger, Head of State, General Abdurrahman Chiani, praised Algeria's stance in support of Niamey's sovereignty and its rejection of any military option in Niger, despite what he describes as futile attempts by certain forces with neo-colonial tendencies.
C'est le lieu de particulièrement saluer.
I would like to express my deep appreciation to the Algerian authorities who, despite the futile attempts of certain neo-colonial powers and some international and regional organizations, have shown their solidarity with the Nigerian people and rejected any military option following the events of July 26, 2023.
In what was described as a historic scene, relations between the two neighboring countries, Algeria and Niger, returned to their normal course. With them, brotherly ties were revived and shape determination blossomed to overcome temporary difficulties, preserve the exemplary nature of their relations, and jointly confront regional challenges.
Algiers and Niamey are getting down to business. Right after Ramadan, work begins on the gas pipeline through Niger. They're also exploring a cross-border cooperation zone and launching Algerian-backed development projects in Niger. The details with Zahra Farjani this time.
Algeria and Niger are moving steadily toward completing a series of major joint infrastructure projects that are set to boost their energy capacities and strengthen economic integration across the Sahel and West Africa through cross-border initiatives.
Recognizing the vast potential of their economic exchanges, the two sides agreed to accelerate the completion of the Trans-Saharan Highway project and other strategic infrastructure linking the two countries, particularly the cross-border fiber optic connection and the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline.
Algiers and Niamey haven't just agreed to speed up ongoing structural projects. They've also paved the way for launching a broader package of development initiatives. These projects are especially important for Niger, which is looking to upgrade its infrastructure and improve public services.
L'on peut ajouter d'autres projets non moins importants.
We also reaffirmed the importance of other projects of equal significance, including the establishment of a dialysis center in Tera, the renovation and expansion of the Algerian-Nigerian French Vocational Secondary School in Zindar, the construction of an Islamic Training Institute in Agadez, the building of a multi-service clinic in Agadez, and the creation of a national center for pedagogical and technical resources in Niamey.
In a key development for energy cooperation in North and West Africa, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune announced the timeline for the operational phase of the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline. The project is designed to transport Nigerian gas through Niger and into Algiers network, which is directly linked to European markets, further cementing Algeria's role as a major energy gateway to Europe.
اتفقنا كذلك على انطلاقة في مشروع إنجاز الأنبوب الغاز العابر عبر التراب النيجيري الشقيق. إذن مباشرة بعد شهر رمضان سوناتراك تأخذ الأمور بزمام وتنطلق في بداية وضع الأنبوب في التراب النيجيري.
The announcement signals clear trilateral political commitment to move the project from a long-standing strategic vision to tangible implementation, a step that could significantly reshape energy cooperation between Africa and Europe in the years ahead.
Algerian Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, General Said Chingriha, received his Italian counterpart, Lieutenant General Mazzillo Caramin, during a working visit to Algiers. The two sides discussed expanding bilateral military cooperation, enhancing coordination on shared interests, and exchanged views on current regional issues. Lieutenant General Caramin praised Algeria's strong commitment to cooperation and consultation, as well as the warm welcome extended to his delegation. President Abdelmadjid Tebboune hailed Algeria as a hub of stability, attracting local and foreign investment, backed by credible data and institutional recognition. Marking National Martyrs' Day on February 18, he affirmed Algeria's ongoing path of sustainable development, transforming the country from crisis to confidence and hope in victorious, forward-looking nation.
We stand with gratitude and pride to affirm our duty of loyalty and steadfastness on this path as we continue at this stage to confront challenges and complete the journey we have begun. It is a journey that has transformed a country once on the brink of danger into one grounded in trust and hope, a new Algeria, supported by the people and engaged in a dynamic of sustainable development. Its progress is visible across the vast regions of the nation. Thanks be to God, despite the difficulties along the way, we have made advances that have turned our beloved country into a vast workshop, filled with signs of work, construction and development in every province. We have also made it a center of stability, attracting both domestic and foreign investment as confirmed by the most credible figures and the recognition of relevant institutions. We believe that what has been achieved is only a modest expression of loyalty to the martyrs and a reflection of the enduring trust of the people, whose hopes and aspirations remain fixed on the journey ahead toward the promise of the emergent state.
Moving on to another topical development, Iran says it will allow UN nuclear inspectors back into its facilities, a move aimed at proving its program is peaceful. A top lawmaker confirmed the Supreme National Security Council signed off on the visits. The goal, he said, is to show there is no deviation toward weaponization. Any nuclear-related step, he added, must get Council approval to stay in line with national security interests. In response to U.S. threats, Saraqji warned of regional repercussions if Iran is attacked, calling any strike on its protected nuclear facilities unprecedented and a war crime.
Inspection of Iran's nuclear facilities require an agreement with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Tehran will continue its constructive dialogue with the agency. The consequences of any attack against us will not remain confined within our borders.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps advisor Hamid Reza Moghadam-Farr warned that any U.S. military strike would trigger a broad Iranian response targeting all American bases and interests across the region, not just isolated sites. He said Iran has sent messages via regional channels indicating that future retaliation would be far wider in scope than previous responses and could include U.S. investments and strategic assets if conflict escalates.
The messages included a warning that investments and interests linked to US President Donald Trump and his son-in-law in some countries of the region could be among the target in the event of a military escalation. Any new confrontation will be different in terms of the nature and scope of the response.
On a similar note, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy Commander Ali Reza Tangsiri warned that Tehran could close the Strait of Hormuz in response to any attack. Fars news agency reported Tangsiri noted that the naval systems deployed in actual combat differ from those used in drills, which recently led to a partial closure of the strait for several hours during the maneuvers that began late Monday. Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi on Tuesday reported tangible progress in the indirect US-Iran talks in Geneva. Posting on X platform, he described the second round as constructive, but stressed that significant work remains before a final agreement can be reached.
The indirect negotiations between Tehran and Washington concluded in Geneva with good progress made toward identifying shared objectives and the relevant technical issues. Together, we made serious effort to establish a number of guiding principles for a final agreement. There is still much work to be done, and the parties departed with clear steps to take ahead of the next meeting.
Indirect negotiations between Washington and Tehran moved a step forward in Geneva this week, with both sides agreeing on guiding principles for a potential nuclear deal, even as sharp warnings and deep mistrust cloud the path ahead. More on this story with Yasin Urkti.
Indirect nuclear talks between the United States and Iran are advancing cautiously in Geneva as Tehran signaled agreement on the general principles of a potential deal, while warning that major hurdles remain. The second round of negotiations in Switzerland ended Tuesday with both sides agreeing on a framework to begin drafting a possible new agreement. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called it the beginning of the process, stressing that finalizing a deal will be difficult and sensitive.
Today we held the second round of indirect talks with the American delegation at the Omani embassy in Geneva. I can say that in this round there were quite serious discussions and a more constructive atmosphere than in the previous rounds. Various ideas were raised and these ideas were seriously discussed, and finally we were able to reach a general agreement on a series of guiding principles that from now on we will move based on those principles and enter into the text of a possible agreement. This does not mean that we can reach an agreement quickly, but at least the path has started. We hope that this will be done as soon as possible, and we're prepared to spend enough time on it. However, when it comes to drafting the text, the work becomes a bit more difficult and detailed.
A senior U.S. official told Reuters that progress had been made, but key details remain unresolved. Iran is expected to submit detailed proposals within 2 weeks aimed at narrowing gaps. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump confirmed Washington's indirect participation in the talks, underscoring the high stakes of renewed diplomacy, while maintaining that military action against Iran remains possible if negotiations fail.
We have big talks. It's going to be very easy. I mean, look, so far, Ukraine better come to the table fast. That's all I'm telling you. We are in a position we want them to come. And by the way,
in the Middle East, tensions persist. Iran's Revolutionary Guard warned it would respond forcefully to any U.S. aggression, including targeting American bases and potentially closing the Strait of Hormuz. President Masoud Pezeshkian reiterated that Iran does not seek nuclear weapons, but vowed to continue its peaceful nuclear program. Whether the current momentum leads to a breakthrough or stalls amid deep mistrust remains unclear, leaving the path to any final agreement uncertain.
To another global news story. Moscow and Kiev met in Geneva on Tuesday with U.S. mediation for a new round of talks on Ukraine. Russia's delegation was led by Vladimir Medinsky, Ukraine by Rustam Umerov, with U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Territorial disputes remain unresolved, with Moscow holding firm and Kiev rejecting U.S. pressure demands for concessions. Ukraine says yes to the U.S. ceasefire plan. President Zelensky announced Kiev is accepting the American proposal for an unconditional long-term halt to fighting. He called the terms realistic and accused Russia of rejecting every offer on the table.
It will soon mark 1 year since Ukraine's most active diplomatic efforts. We agreed to all realistic proposals from the United States, starting with the proposal for an unconditional and long-term ceasefire. Russia rejects this proposal, continues its attacks on the front lines, and carries out strikes on our cities and energy infrastructure.
For its part, the Kremlin said no concrete results are expected from the ongoing trilateral talks in Geneva on Ukraine. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that Tuesday would see no announcements, with discussions planned to continue over 2 days.
Trilateral negotiations will continue in Geneva. Our delegation is there. I don't think we should expect any news today, because as you know, the talks are scheduled to continue tomorrow. There are no plans to make any statements. Of course, everything will be held behind closed doors.
Meanwhile, Trump is turning up the heat. Speaking aboard Air Force One on Monday night, the president urged Ukraine to cut a deal with Russia and fast. He called the ongoing Geneva talks important, but insisted a resolution would be very easy.
Well, with big talks, it's going to be very easy. I mean, look, so far, Ukraine better come to the table fast. That's all I'm telling you. We are in a position, we want them to come.
Ukraine is accusing Russia of sabotaging peace talks before they even start. On the eve of new round talks in Geneva, Moscow launched a massive missile and drone barrage across multiple regions. Ukraine's foreign minister called it a calculated strike and proof Russia has no interest in peace.
To what extent does Russia ignore peace efforts? A large-scale missile and drone attack against Ukraine carried out just before the next round of negotiations in Geneva. It is a calculated strike aimed at causing the maximum possible damage to our energy sector. This reflects Russia's contempt for peace efforts.
On the ground, Russia launched large-scale strikes on Ukraine's military, industrial and energy sites, citing Kiev's shelling of Russian infrastructure. Russian defense said its air defenses shot down 8 guided bombs and 334 Ukrainian drones. Meanwhile, Ukraine confirmed a successful raid on Russia's largest southern oil refinery, causing a fire in the second such operation this week. And in the Gaza file tonight, a child was killed and another injured by Zionist occupation forces in Jabalia, northern Gaza on Tuesday. Palestinian media reported intense airstrikes on Khan Yunis and Rafah in southern Gaza, alongside building demolitions east of Gaza City, continuing violations of the ceasefire. The Zionist occupation forces swept through the West Bank Tuesday, arresting at least 10 Palestinians in Nablus, Salfit, Al-Quds, Ramallah and Jenin. Among those detained, former prisoners. Meanwhile, the UN is speaking out. Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the Zionist occupation's decision to seize more Palestinian land, calling settlement expansion illegal and a direct threat to the two-state solution. His spokesman warned that this move fuels instability.
The decision could lead to the dispossession of Palestinians of their property and risks expanding Israeli control over land in the area. Such measures, including Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, are not only destabilizing, but as recalled by the International Court of Justice, illegal, unlawful. He calls on the Israeli government to immediately reverse these measures. He again warns that the current trajectory on the ground is eroding the prospects for the two-state solution.
Ahead of Ramadan, the Zionist occupation is tightening restrictions on Palestinian worshippers in the West Bank, limiting access to Al-Aqsa and other holy sites. In Gaza, meanwhile, the holy month begins for the third straight year under fire. Residents are making Ramadan amid ongoing bombardment, a stifling blockade, and a worsening humanitarian crisis. Karim Mustafa has the story.
While many Muslims around the world celebrate Ramadan with joy and sense of freedom, Palestinians are observing the holy month amid ongoing crimes of the Zionist regime that stretches from north to south and east to west of Palestine, in blatant violation of their right to freely practice their religious rights. In the devastated Gaza Strip, this is the first Ramadan since a fragile ceasefire took effect on October 10th, and the third observed amid widespread destruction after nearly 3 years of genocidal war. Entire neighborhoods lie in ruins, thousands of families remain displaced, and a tight siege continues to restrict the entry of aid and basic supplies.
Before the war, we lived happily in our home. We ate and drank with joy, enjoying taif, watermelon, and everything else. Today, we've been deprived of all that. I see goods in the shop and turn my face away because I have no money to buy them. I'm a man suffering from high blood pressure and diabetes, and I cannot walk. Those living in tents must be helped.
Before the war, life was beautiful. We used to visit relatives. I would go to my parents, siblings, and loved ones, go down to the market to shop for the house and prepare for Ramadan. Today there is nothing. We are living in tragedy. There is no electricity or war, and we've been displaced from our homes from place to place. In one location, seawater flooded in and swept away our tents.
The crimes of the Zionist occupier have extended far beyond Gaza. Residents of the occupied West Bank are preparing to welcome Ramadan in an atmosphere of heightened tensions, as the Zionist regime seeks to annex areas belonging to the Palestinians and their authority, an illegal measure that reshapes geographic, legal, and religious realities in pursuit of the so-called Greater Israel Project.
Before the war, it was packed with people and visitors, but it became an isolated place where no one comes. So we said we need to bring people back to this place. The main idea was to install a Ramadan crescent in many Palestinian areas to enjoy the holy month. And as the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, paradise is adorned with the arrival of the month of Ramadan.
In terms of Ramadan preparations, we are ready, but we hope God sends goodness and sustenance to the people. The situation is very difficult.
Between the West Bank, constrained by a web of checkpoints, and the Gaza Strip, weighed down by devastations, Palestinians strive to break the shackles of the occupation. They look ahead to welcoming the holy month to the sound of takbirs rising from minarets, not silenced by bombardment, nor diminished by the siege imposed on them.
In other news, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres reaffirmed that self-determination is a fundamental right of the 17 non-self-governing territories. Speaking in New York to the UN Special Committee on Non-Self-Governing Territories, he called for continued support for their path to independence and highlighted the UN's role in helping over 100 countries gain independence since its founding.
With well over 100 nations gaining independence since 1945. More people than ever now enjoy the right and the dignity of self-determination. Yet the legacy of colonialism has left profound scars through deeply rooted mechanisms of economic exploitation, as well as in the form of racism, inequality, and persistent exclusion from the decision-making bodies. Today, 17 non-self-governing territories remain. 3 priorities must guide their destiny. First, inclusive dialogue among non-self-governing territories, administering powers, member states, and all stakeholders. This process must be steered by the unique aspirations and needs of each territory and take place on a case-by-case basis in accordance with the UN Charter, the Declaration on Decolonization, and the relevant resolutions of the General Assembly.
In Morocco, anger is spilling into the streets. Several regions saw protests Tuesday over what demonstrators called serious irregularities in flood aid distribution. In Kenitra, the Dar al-Qadari commune and villages across the Gharb region, residents are demanding investigation and accountability for those they say funneled help to the wrong people. In Tunisia, President Kais Saied reaffirmed state unity and warned that remnants of the old regime are trying to regain influence and stir unrest. Meeting Prime Minister Sar Zafarani at the Carthage Palace on Monday, he stressed the need for responsibility in managing public institutions, called for legislative and administrative overhaul, and said reforms are essential to safeguard the nation's progress. In Libya, the UN ambassador Tahar Sunni reaffirmed support for Libyan-led solution toward general elections and an end to the transitional phase. Speaking Tuesday ahead of UN envoy Hannah Tete's Security Council briefing, he stressed that any political process must reflect genuine national will and divisions and strengthen stability. The UN support mission in Libya warned Monday that the ongoing deadlock threatens national cohesion, urging leaders to prioritize a political process serving Libya's national interests. More international news stories in the News in Brief with Sufyan Kantari.
The International Organization for Migration said more than 529,000 people returned to Sudan from neighboring countries between January 2024 and December 2025. According to the agency, 89% of the returnees came from Egypt, with smaller numbers returning from Chad and Ethiopia. About 41 cited improved security and better job opportunities as reasons for going back. In Pakistan, the army announced that at least 11 security personnel and 3 civilians, including a child, were killed in the 2 bomb attacks and a clash between police and gunmen in the country's northwest. The military said on Tuesday that 7 others, including a woman and children, were wounded in the violence, according to Reuters. Bangladesh interim Prime Minister Muhammad Yunus announced his resignation following the Nationalist Party's victory in the legislative elections, a move paving the way for Tariq Rahman to take office. The Nobel Peace Prize laureate said the interim government was stepping down, but stressed that democratic practice, freedom of expression, and respect for fundamental rights must continue in Bangladesh. Hong Kong welcomed the Year of the Horse with Cathay International Chinese New Year Night Parade, featuring a vibrant lineup of local and international performers and Team Chatsui. The Hong Kong Tourism Board said groups from the United States, Italy, Spain, and Australia and other regions joined the celebration, bringing global flair to the Lunar New Year festivities.
And that's all for tonight. For more on any of these stories, find us on our social media platforms. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great night.